All righty. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to day 27, April 21st. We are super pumped today because not one, but two of the most influential, and I mean this sincerely, this is not hyperbole, two of the most influential educators in the country, not only now, but for many, many years are joining us today, Kylene and Bob Probst. I'll say before you say hello, Penny, and Kylene, when we were with you last week, I said the same thing. You know, early in my career, I was just beginning to coach other teachers, and I leaned on, and I know you've written a ton of books since this, but When Kids Can't Read was one of the real game changers in my thinking as a young teacher, really as a mentor text for me. I think, don't you all agree that there are certain kind of keystone texts that are part of your teaching DNA, and certainly When Kids Can't Read. And then Bob, way back in the day, this is the first edition, which I still have and apparently have filtered from some library somewhere.
Okay. I have a copy of Rosenblatt's Literature's Exploration that somebody gave me that I discovered he had stolen from some library.
Right. And then your next edition of that book, which is rimmed with all kinds of Post-it notes, again, is, I just remember, like, on page 3 of that book, you said, you know, this idea of bringing prior knowledge into reading, and you gave the word car, and then you asked kids, what are all the, you know, associations you make with the word car? Both of those are just, I mean, really in the pantheon of DNA for me. So I'm super thrilled to be able to hang out with you guys today.
That's really sweet, Kelly. And I just want to tell you that I did notice while you were talking about kids, twice we managed to use the phrase, when I was a young teacher. And it just, I thought, oh my God, I'm getting older by the moment, as he talks about being a mere child when Kids came out. I really think we're going to need to rethink
That's
that.
good.
Yeah. Penny, can you start over? Can you? I'm kidding.
Oh, no.
But I would like you to stew with this. No, I was thinking, do you remember when you guys wrote Adolescent Literacy into Practice? And I was asked to write one of those pieces for it. And my assigned editor was Bob. And I was paralyzed with fear because response and analysis was so important. I moved to the high school and thought, this is the book that's going to teach me how to teach, which it did. But I didn't know how to write when you were going to read it, and you were so nice, but I was terrified. And I think about Kylene, you published the first piece I ever had published, Writing Giants and Columbine, and I danced around my house and screamed your name because you were an icon, a mentor, and you somehow let me into this world. Not just the books you wrote, but to let me write my own. So
your first article was in Voices from the Middle?
It was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember reading this article and thinking, oh my God, I don't know who this person is. But we're obviously age peers. And
I still say that occasionally, Kylene. I really don't know who this person is. So it's all good.
So our purpose today, we invited you two on for a reason, and that is because you are actively collaborating as writers, as Kelly and I are. And we believe so much that kids who are allowed to collaborate as writers can grow so much. Just all the talk that results from two kids sitting side by side and trying to write that argument together, or trying to create something for others to read. But when you have to do it in tandem, there's challenges in that, there's wonderful results of that, and there's just like pure craziness at times. So we thought we would share, as 4 people who do a lot of this co-authoring work, some of what we think about it, stories we could share. I'm sorry, I got to get rid of the dog who is barking along inside my study.
Well, it's the background I have up sort of represents for me the essence of collaborative writing. I've probably
that Kylene?
You've always been really, really good with metaphor, Bob. You've always been really, really
No, this is not working well for me, because Kelly starts off with how much younger he is, and Bob starts off with I am a dinosaur.
I assume Kelly was talking about you and Penny when he said all these elder
I'm just going to say one last time, Kylene, this is fossilized into my teaching. I just want to say that.
This is why it is so hard to write with Kelly, this person.
Well, look at what I'm looking at. When I get up in the mornings and turn on Zoom, I go through 5 or 6 of these and now it's met every morning with, I need a green screen. Don't you think I need a green screen? Let's take just a moment and look at green screen.
You know, the background would show up better if I had.
So maybe you guys could talk a little bit about how do you work together? How does a book come from the two of you?
So just so you'll know, we actually took some notes about this morning. We're taking this interview very seriously, and we are. I put on lipstick. I mean, we are prepared.
I didn't put on any lipstick, but I am taking it seriously. That's for sure.
So, thank you, Baker.
Okay, go ahead, Kylene. Yeah, I didn't mean to
Okay,
interrupt.
so I'm going to start. You know, we've got over 20 years of writing together, and when we thought about it earlier, when y'all asked us to do this, we really went back and realized that we began as people who presented together. So our first attempt at collaboration was not to sit and write together. And then our very first attempt was to write an article together, because we thought if maybe we could handle, 6 pages and still emerge as friends. And so we just did an article together, and it really went well because Bob was very busy. So I wrote it and he read it and said, yeah, this is fine. And we turned it in. And
That's
I
not
thought,
true.
it is true. And I thought,
put your name on it, Bob?
and I thought this will be so easy because I'll just do what I want. I'll get to put his name on it to lend it authority, and it'll be done. And then we did the edited collection, Turning Promise into Practice. And so then we were learning about each other as editors. And I discovered, that I'm going to go through life and not be upset if an infinitive is split. Some infinitives just have to move into different houses. They don't get along better. It's better for all the other words around them. And Bob wants to keep a family together for forever. And he does not want to split his infinitives.
I like to occasionally split an infinitive. Wondered if you would catch that. But occasionally, but Kylene is right. I am a little stuffier than she is, and she's a little chattier than I am.
I hate it when he says chattier, because chattier makes me feel dumber.
No, not dumb. Smart chatty.
Back to the writing process, Bob. The way Kylene just described it, is that gel with your take on it?
Yeah, it takes a lot of collaboration. We work in very different ways. Kylene likes to talk her way into the book, and she talks things out and she changes her mind. I like to sit down and start writing and see where I end up, and then I'll do something with it. Kylene can talk a lot longer than I can listen. I mean, that's part of the collaboration. I have reached level 43 on Minecraft when she thinks I'm listening to her. And actually, I've got 4 monitors up. I got Minecraft on one, Pac-Man on another, and Bob,
hold on. Bob, hold on a second. Honey, can you order some more monitors?
Okay. Oh yeah, it's very helpful.
It will save your writing relationship with Penny. Yeah, just occasionally I'll say, you haven't looked at the camera in 2 hours, come back.
It's because I don't want to lose my place in Pac-Man.
But Bob is absolutely right. I have a much stronger need to know where I'm going before I get in the car and go there. And Bob is willing to just get in the car and drive, and then to look up and say, hey, we're in Idaho. And I'm saying, but but that's not where we wanted to go.
As Kelly knows, real men don't ask for directions. We just get in the car and go.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna actually push back a little bit on that.
Okay.
I think Penny and my relationship with Penny as a writer is the opposite. She gets in the car and says, "Let's see where it will go."
Mm-hmm.
And I like the map. I like having the map.
Yeah.
I think the part of Penny's brilliance, though, is her ability to go out and search, thinking she doesn't know what is there yet. But I have to say, because of the 3-hour time difference, that when I wake up in the morning and I look at my phone and there's a text from Penny that says the 3 most dangerous words in the English language.
Oh, Bob knows what they are. Yeah, I was going to say.
I've been thinking. As we're working on chapter 2, when I see the phrase "I've been thinking," I now know chapter 2 no longer exists.
I hate that phrase. Every time
Oh,
my heart sinks when Kylene says, "I've been thinking," and
you know what's funny though that you named
that
is exactly the same is that Kelly and I were presenting together first, and we presented together for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And there is so much collaboration in these slides are yours. And then I would say like, but why that? And he would say, what is this? And you start really sharing what you think about the work because you're preparing to do this. And it was my 20 minutes and his 20 minutes and someone else's 20 minutes was the way it started. And so it didn't always sync, but it led to those conversations. And I think that's really interesting as the way a kind of collaborative thinking relationship can begin is in presentations.
Mm-hmm. And what we realize is sometimes it's not, we use the term collaborative, but Bob and I have recognized, you know, for a long time we would say we compromise when we write, but that's not true because I'm actually not positive that compromise is possible. I mean, if he wants a hamburger and I want a grilled cheese, and so, you know, we say, well, we'll compromise and have a hamburger. Well, no, I didn't compromise. And if we say, well, we'll compromise and have a cheeseburger, well, no, I didn't want the meat. I mean, so I think that what happens is that there's acquiescence at times. You listen to the other person's vision, and if you can go along with it, you go along. Other times, Bob and I absolutely blend our thoughts, and we will go back paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, and sometimes we will spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes on a word, one word. Do we really mean solitary or do we mean independent? And what's the difference between independent and solitary? And when we cannot reach that blended thought, then in a lot of our books, you will see sidebars that say, you know, Bob actually would have said it this way. And I think it is critically important for our readers to see that two people who share extremely similar educational philosophies can still have differences in how they would get somewhere. And we can respect each other's differences enough that you know, I'm always happy to put Bob in a sidebar. It's just fine.
We work as sort of a democracy, which explains why I have lost so many votes 1-to-1. I just...
You know,
Kylene's electoral college doesn't work for Bob.
She says, we'll turn this over to the electoral college, and if that doesn't work, we'll turn it over to the Supreme Court. But either way, you're going to lose. So.
Well, you know, we can laugh about that as far as things like headers and titles, and I think I'm probably better at visualizing how the book looks because I'm a very, very visual writer. And Bob is much better at connecting the world to what he's trying to say about a specific instance. But what is really hard for me, because writing for me is extremely intimate. I've got to be willing to show you something about me that many times I haven't even shown myself. And oftentimes when I'm writing professionally, that means it's about me as a teacher and me as a person who has felt that so much of my teaching was inadequate, and me as a teacher who knows I can't fix kids' problems at home, and that's hard because I'm a fixer. But it's extremely, so it becomes very intimate. And so then when you have someone you're collaborating with, I have to be willing to hand off my writing to Bob Probst, whose worst drafts from a bar on the back of a napkin will be far better than my most polished drafts will ever be. And he'll say, here's what I wrote. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to send him what I wrote. And then when he writes back and says, you're just chattier than I am. Oh my God. I find that it takes courage to have a partner, because your partner.
The courage to, especially when I'm writing something that I just can't make sense of. It's something that I really feel like I'm on the edge of understanding myself. And it takes such courage to send that to Kelly. I think of Kelly Gallagher in all capital letters, right? And then I send it to him.
The reading God.
Right. But sometimes he will come back and he'll just have rearranged it. And now I know that's what I meant. Right. But he had to do something with it. And Kelly's very direct in his writing. Like, he can name from A to B to C. And I'm just like, we're over here. It's Z, and then it's L, and it's R. And I'm really trying. They're all going to come together somehow. And he just has a way of like making it all go in order. That's helpful.
I think Penny tried to compliment me one time when she said, your writing it's really simple.
I don't think I said that. There's no record.
I would go with that over chatty, and I think Bob means that I'm simple and simplistic.
You and I, Kelly, need to do one of these things, just the two of us. The other day we were working on a survey, and I sent in a sentence over to her. I said, what do you think about this particular sentence? And she burst out laughing.
It was awful.
I didn't think it was that awful, actually. But
upon considering the conceptions that you have been considering, while during and before the situation we currently find ourselves in.
That's not what I said.
I think it's harder.
And I think the question simply was, do you like to read? Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering, though, like the lessons that we learned, because we've both written more than one thing in our partnerships. Yeah. I'm wondering the lessons we've learned about peer writing, because that massive study that came out, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 years ago, Writing Next, right? Said there are 11, 12 things that we know work when we go to teach young writers. And one of the 11, and I remember this distinctly because I was not really good at it in my own classroom, was having kids compose together. So what comes from this that we can kind of come back to teachers and say, there's a relevancy in your classroom here?
You want to go first, Bob, or you want me?
One thing that comes out of it is sort of a clearer perception of your own style and your own way of working. I've learned more about the way I work and about my style, in part because it's different from Kylene's. And so I will see what she would have written about the same thing I have written about. We try to blend them together occasionally. And that teaches me something about alternatives. I think probably I wasn't as alert to the alternatives before. And you think things through, they come out in some form or another. That's the way it is. And then to go back and look at it and say, how else might I have done that, is a little bit hard to do, but it grows easier when I see somebody else take the same issue or working toward the same end and generate different language for it. So it's taught me more about my own way of working.
So Kelly, can I add to that? I find that asking younger writers, more novice writers, to write collaboratively probably doesn't mean a lot to them because they don't understand what it means to write as an individual. And so to just write on their own. And so to use that language, I think probably adds immediate confusion. What I would want to do is say, find someone that wants to write about the same topic as you want to write, but maybe from a different perspective or maybe in a different voice, but is interested in the same thing you're interested in. And I would start them at the end. You write what you want to write, and then get with your partner and say to your partners, which parts from both do we like? And we want to blend, we want to put together. And then I would say, and now from that, let's both see what we haven't thought of that needs to go in there. Where are the holes? What's still missing? And then I'd say, well, let's look at our lead. You know, do we have a lead that's going to capture our readers? I'm always working with kids on transitions. I think that's where we lose so many kids. So how is your transition from here to there? But I would start them with, you've got the same interest. You write yours, I'll write mine. Let's blend. And then from the blending, let's add. And then from the adding, let's edit. And then look, we've collaborated. But I think to ask them to sit from the beginning and do that is now, instead of one blank sheet of paper, it's 2 blank sheets of paper, and that's scary as can be. So
I would agree, except that I would add, so my college students, I will give them 3 sources of evidence around a big idea and say, I want the 2 of you to figure out a way to blend these sources to come up with a couple paragraphs that explain what you think about this issue. And I tell them it's all about talk. It's all about figuring it out together. The product doesn't matter. And they do it in class. And I think it's because they're older and it's not graded. You're going to send it to me, you're going to email me, and I'm going to give you feedback on how this, but what I'm really interested in is how do you work together to come to a better understanding of what you're trying to say? How do you clarify this?
You know, I think we've got to remember that the Writing Next report came after a report from the Fortune 500 CEOs, in which they were asked, what are the skills most needed in the workplace? And then somewhere in the top 5 was the ability to work collaboratively. Nowhere was the ability to write a 5-paragraph essay. Right. So everything that was skill-oriented was nowhere in the top 5, 10, 15, 20, but collaboration was. So then came Writing Next, that put in writing collaboratively. And we've got to understand that school is almost always 2 years, 3 years behind what the business world tells us that they're valuing. And so now, if that's what they're valuing, collaboration, well, that even means a collaborative report. It means a collaborative project design that you want to give. It means an email that everybody has to sign off on. It means all those things in the world. So we also might ask ourselves, what are the real world types of writing kids are going to be doing? And how can we let them collaborate on that? Because how I collaborate on an email might be very different than the text we're both going to send to our parents, just whatever's age appropriate.
Yeah, it made me think when you were saying, that you work kids up into it, that you don't start by trying to write a big old essay together, that maybe one of the, I was thinking in terms of like collaborative writing as a way to sharpen reading. You read something and as a group, you get together and write a 1-paragraph summary of whatever you just read. And that's a way of kind of at a smaller level, but I hadn't thought about it in terms of emails and other kinds of ways that you could scaffold kids into that mindset a little bit.
I just always think it's important when we see us making any sort of shift, large or small, in education, to say, why are we making that shift? And almost always It's because we finally figured out that that's what's valued in the business world. And so project-centered education right now is coming back out of, working in an industry is more about figuring out problems and then coming up with lots of solutions for them.
Yeah. I think about how much of the time kids are in groups with people who aren't necessarily like-minded and having to wrestle with things that are difficult. They're in freshman seminars with all kinds of kids looking at mass incarceration who come from different contexts and different understandings, and they're having to look at the same information and figure out their way around it, right? And they often have to write together in college, come up with a presentation together, just like you talked about beginning your relationship that way. We write our presentations. You have a big idea that you're heading towards and you're accumulating, I think it's definitely a real world skill. I watch what my son does in his work. It's all on Zoom and it's creating an FDA approval process right now that's a group team. But I think that the reality of writing professionally for the four of us, I would say it is no faster to write with someone else. People have often said it must be, and I'm thinking,
no.
I don't think we've done that yet.
No. It is much slower, but it's better. It is much better because.
Think about it, Bob. You might have had 9 more books out by now.
Probably. Yeah. On this whole issue, I think it's important to learn how to write collaboratively, but I also think it's important to spend some time just writing your own section or piece, even a whole chapter or whatever. I was thinking, I hadn't discussed this with Kylene, but I think maybe after we finish what we're working on now, one thing we might want to do is write a book of essays where we keep our voices separate in perhaps the first 2 sections and then try in the third to merge them in some way. Her take on something, my take on something, and then we get together and we kick it around and reshape it. I don't know whether that's a good idea or not, but it was something that I had meant to talk to her if Finding Nemo hadn't interfered.
Well, I have to say, I would read that book. I find that fascinating, but that's actually the way Kelly and I work. I'm writing a chapter right now. He's writing a different chapter. And then eventually we give them to the other and say, go ahead and change anything you need to and make this work better. It's worked for us.
Yeah, we sometimes go chapter by chapter, but I would say we more often are working on the same chapter, maybe different parts of it. And there is just this artificial vision, which came before we had computers in the classroom. This artificial division of what the writing process has created for too many people the idea that you're going to finish something and then you're going to revise it. We revise. Our writing is revision, right? Writing is revision for us. So as we're writing, I might be looking at something he's already done and I'm going backwards and he's moving forward. I think that discovering how you work with your writing partner is critical. And some days you think, how could I ever do anything else? And other days you say, really, it's 10 o'clock. Is it time for a drink?
Oh, that's a perfect segue. My last question is, you have to share one thing that drives you crazy about your writing partner. Kelly, don't jump in so quick.
Well, Penny, why don't you go first? What's one thing that makes you crazy?
Ooh, I haven't even thought of one.
Oh, what a phony excuse that is.
That's not true. I now immediately have one. So we kind of talked about this with 180 Days. So I'm a kind of a nervous, insecure writer. And I sent Kelly a piece that I just felt like had finally nailed thinking I'd been looking for forever. And I wrote in the note to it when I shared it with him, just don't even think about how this looks yet. Will you just help me understand what you think about the thinking? And I opened it up after he'd looked at it and he had covered it with his edits, covered it. And it was all in pink. I called it the red wedding moment. He didn't like hear what I was asking for and instead gave me what was very good feedback on how to change how it was written. But what I wanted him to hear that I wanted, he just didn't hear.
Yeah.
That can happen because you're in different places.
Thanks for coming, everybody, today. We appreciate that.
So Bob, what's yours?
Yeah, Bob, what do I do the most? Because there are many things, but what do I do the most?
Yeah.
Well, the first 6 that come to mind.
No, he has.
Oh, just
Kelly
one? Just one.
He asked for one.
All right, my mistake. I must have misheard the question, but I think probably what frustrates me occasionally is that we will get to a point where we're pretty much on the path. You know, we finally arrived at a table of contents. We know what we're doing. I'm beginning to see where what I'm writing might fit. And then I get up the next morning and she says, I've been thinking. And all I want to do is go back to bed at that point because
I just steal your answer, Bob. Your answer's my answer.
It's just, you know, I have to go back and I think, and that's what's happening right now with this book. I got a lot of draft written. I've got no idea where it's going to go. But I know that
I feel your pain, Bob, and I'm going to ask Kylene to share very briefly because I actually have to go to a staff meeting. So we have to wrap this up. I'm still teaching. I have to go to class. Kylene, 30 seconds.
There is nothing about Bob that bothers me as a co-writer. He is. That's
probably true.
He is just absolutely perfect, and except for the fact that he often won't write what I've asked him to write, then we get along just fine.
I don't take assignments well, I guess.
Well, I know you're two of our favorite people in the whole world, which is why we hang out a lot when we're at NCTE and other places. I just want to say what a thrill it was again to see you guys and to have you come on and share, which have to be the most laugh per moment thing that we've recorded so far, which does not surprise me given our past.
Right forever. You two are gold. I love reading what
you two also.
National treasures.
We hope we get to see you in person really soon. Stay in and stay healthy until then.
I'm gonna have to watch this over to listen to Bob's parts because I couldn't concentrate with that fish nibbling on his ear the entire time. So I'm gonna have to come back and look at that. So
thanks you so much.
Everybody.
All right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Love you all.
Bye.